What do you mean by you can tell by what pitches they throw? So if a guy yanks a sweeper more side to side, he has a different tear than a guy like ripping a fastball down. Is that kind of what
Yes.
you mean by what you said?
Yes. You can see that.
Joined by a special guest right now, Dr. Keith Meister, who has been outspoken about the arm injuries that have been going on, and obviously has worked with so many pitchers on fixing their arms. Dr. Meister, great to have you on. And I have to imagine, how you doing? It's probably a weird time for you, right? Because you've been outspoken about this, and it's not fun to have so many people visiting you with these problems, right?
Yeah, this is. I've been doing this 30 plus years now. And AJ, how you doing, man? I haven't seen you in a long time.
I know, brother. How are you? You never listen. My elbow still feels fucking great. Okay, so you never touched me. I don't know if you ever even touched me. We'd say hi to each other in the training room. Well, I was gonna say, man, he never touched me, so we're good.
Yeah, and you landed exactly where you need to be.
That's right. He's using different muscles now.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey,
actually, not really.
Hey, so first of all, how are things out there? And I have to ask this because the Rangers have not got their City Connect uniforms yet. Yep. So how on earth did you get your City Connect polo if the team doesn't have their jerseys yet?
I don't know, man. I guess I'm in that VIP line.
You're a guy.
Get some respect.
You're a guy. Yep. I get it.
I've been around long enough, I guess.
So let's I know you're a busy man. Let's get into the tough stuff. No, all good. These guys are the fun ones. I unfortunately will bring some Grim Reaper advice here. But just, with the conversation sparking up again recently about elbow injuries, can you tell us what your stance is and what you've communicated to the league about how to fix the problem that we're dealing with?
I guess I have spoken a lot more about it than any time in the past. I feel like this is a health issue, and this is the population of patients that I take care of, and so if I can offer some valuable advice, potentially at least keep the conversation going in the right direction, then maybe we can do some good here, because you're right. I mean, the numbers are absolutely astronomical. They're through the roof. We're probably double what we were at any time at this time of the year before. I did about 230 elbow ligaments last year. I've done 70 just in the first quarter alone this year. The month of April, I'll probably do 40 plus. And the preponderance of this is on the pro side, but we're seeing the same kind of spike on the college and the high school side. And I think that we've known for years that this increase in velocity, which has trended up, has resulted in this set of consequences. But I think there's a broader picture than this. I think what I like to call the designer pitches, I think has had a significant impact equally as well. And I think that those of us that are seeing a lot of this stuff with great frequency are seeing these patterns over and over and over again now, to the point at which I can tell you that I can look at an MRI scan almost and tell you that this pattern of injury is something that we're seeing with particular pitches. So we can almost look at an MRI and the type of tear and say, oh, this guy's throwing this kind of pitch. And so I think it's something that we need to take a broader look at. And again, I think a lot of this is multifactorial, no question, but there's no question velocity and spin for me are two very, very significant additive risk factors here. And this is the way the game is being taught now at all ages. What I've told MLB is this is not going to change at the younger ages until it changes at the upper brackets. Because if the scouts are not going to start looking for anything different, well, then everybody is going to train as is required to be able to get a foot in the door, so to speak. So until we start to change the conversation and change the philosophy and swing the pendulum back, I don't see this getting any better. In fact, I don't see it stabilizing. I see it continuing to worsen, and it's tragic.
Doc, so I heard what you just said, and obviously you're one of the foremost authorities on this whole thing. What do you mean by you can tell by what pitches they throw? So if a guy yanks a sweeper more side to side, he has a different tear than a guy like ripping a fastball down. Is that kind of what
Yes.
you mean by what you said?
Yes, you can see that, especially on guys that have already had reconstructions, because look, AJ, you've been around a long time, you've seen it enough. I mean, guys used to, you do a TJ, and that would be a career. He'd be fine for the rest of his career. Then it would be like, oh, these things will last 10 to 12 years, and then it was like, well, maybe they'll get 7 to 8, and now these things are re-tearing at 3 to 5 years, and you're looking at the same procedure done by some very, very talented surgeons with a lot of experience, but yet the results aren't anywhere near what they used to be. And so we've had just these greater and greater challenges. And yes, the tear patterns are representative very often, and the recurrent tear patterns representative very often of the types of pitches being thrown. And, I've talked to my front office people, I've talked to a lot of baseball people about this, and I think that our nomenclature now is very, very antiquated. We talk about fastballs and curveballs and sliders and changeups, but we all know that there are umpteen different numbers of changeups and umpteen different numbers of sliders that people throw. And one of the things I do is every individual that comes in the office, I flip them a baseball and I say, show me what you're throwing. Show me how you grip a baseball. Tell me about the pitches that you're throwing. So, I do somewhat of a deep dive into this, and then we start to talk about metrics. And for me, one of the major risk factors is horizontal ball movement. So forget about what you're calling these pitches, whether it's a changeup or a slider, whether it's, arm side run or opposite arm side run or whatnot. To me, it's horizontal ball movement, and to create horizontal ball movement, you've got to grip the crap out of the baseball, and then you have to cut it, either pronate it hard or supinate it hard with a very, very firm grip. And it's causing this, what we call eccentric load on the muscles on the inner side of the elbow, and then everywhere up the kinetic chain, meaning the lat and the teres, which we're seeing a huge number of tears in now that we never saw before, shoulder capsular tears. So I think they're all a consequence of this change in pitch design. And I think the data is there, and I think we just need to take a harder look at it. And one of the things I've told baseball, I'm not against any of these things ever being thrown again. It's just we need to figure out what are the safe parameters with which we can do this. What's the threshold in which a guy can throw off-speed pitches or these particular types of off-speed pitches and not cross a line where the injury risk spikes significantly. But, you have teams now pushing guys in the minor leagues to throw 65, 70, 75% off-speed stuff. And it's not a circle change. It's all these movement pitches, these pitches with horizontal movement and metrics, what I call a power changeup and the sweeping slider in particular. And we need to look at what is the safe threshold with which to throw these, with what frequency, so we can begin to at least tutor guys a little bit more smartly. And I think the data is there. We need to look at it harder.
When you say threshold, do you mean the amount of times it's thrown? Because the person I always talk about is Aroldis Chapman, threw 106 miles an hour and has never had Tommy John surgery. He doesn't go out and throw 106 miles an hour every pitch. Is it because these guys are throwing that horizontal moving pitch 60 to 70% of the time, or would they still get injured if they threw it, 30% of the time? Like, which frequency are you looking at? How hard the pitch is thrown and spun, or is it that it's thrown 30 times a game?
Yeah, I think it's yes. I think the problem with those pitches is to throw them effectively, you have to put a max effort into that pitch. You have to really squeeze the crap out of the baseball to get 20 inches of horizontal movement on a sweeper. To get 18 inches of horizontal movement on a power changeup, you've got to squeeze the ball very, very hard. So you're right. Chaps, a great example. He's also a very big man, and he wasn't throwing sweepers. He was throwing a fastball. And I think a fastball alone, yes, it's a risk factor, but you also have to look at who's throwing it and how they're using the pitch and whatnot. And you're right. He's not throwing max effort every pitch, but I think those particular pitches, to be able to throw them effectively, you have to throw them with a max effort, number one. Number two, yes, frequency also. I think that if you start to take that max effort pitch and you run it out there 60, 70% of the time, well, then you got a double whammy there. You don't take your car out on the road and you don't take it and put the pedal to the metal every time you accelerate. And I always say your best pitchers, your greatest pitchers in the game are the guys that know when to take their foot off the gas. They're not breaking, but they know that they don't have to throw the pitch the hardest every time they go out there. But the problem with those two pitches in particular is that you've got to throw it with a certain degree of effort for them to be effective.
I mean, we all know you drive a Ferrari, so I mean, your pedal is always to the metal,
man.
okay? It's a Porsche and a Ferrari, you know,
Wrong guy, man. Wrong guy.
Convertible. You know, we know how it is. It's okay. That's why that analogy.
Wrong guy.
All right. You're mentioning all this stuff about grip and having to grip it harder. Do you think the lack of sticky stuff, or the lack of a tacky ball, or the lack of something to help pitchers get grip is also helping these numbers continue to go up? Because if you have a stickier ball, you don't have to grip it as hard. A lot of the pitchers now are complaining about a chalky ball, a slippery ball, right? Where in the past, I mean, I know spider tack or whatever, but they had a little pine tar. They'd go, let me grab a little pine tar, a little hair gel, a little sunscreen, whatever it is, make it a little bit stickier. Now they can't do that, so they have a chalky ball, wet grip, and it's slipping. So they're like, gosh, I got to just rip this ball. And then it leads to, I mean, just me doing that, I'm like, man, I can feel it. Like, I mean, not, you know what I'm saying? So does he think that has any effect?
I do, actually. I think that, baseball will say that spin rates haven't changed since they've taken away the tack in the game. Pitchers accommodate, though. I mean, they're talented, talented athletes, and they're resourceful, and they've accommodated. But unfortunately, that accommodation is exactly as you say. It's having to squeeze the ball that much harder. And I can't believe that isn't having some effect. And as I said, I think this is all multifactorial, but these are things that we have to look at. And these are things I talk to every pitcher that walks in the door about, pitch clock and tack and so forth. And so, yes, I think to your point, I would agree with you.
Do you think teams are going to take your research and use it against players in the sense of, oh, you know what? Dr. Meister told us this group of pitchers that throws a 20-inch break sweeper is 60% more likely to blow out. We're going to give less of a contract. Do you feel like they could use this information, and this information should be presented to players and teams alike?
I think
players
you're
and
right.
players and teams.
No, I know what you're saying, and I understand the reality of the business side of the game. But my goal is as a healthcare provider is to provide this information to my patients so that I can maintain a certain level of health. And I think you're correct. I think, and I tell patients this now, and it's amazing. I flip these individuals of baseball when they come in, especially the younger ones, especially the ones that are there with parents. These kids are throwing these sweepers, and I had a young man in the office today from out of the area, came in and just absolutely blew his elbow out, been throwing a sweeper with a 20-inch break, 50% of the time. And I mean, 16 years old. I mean, that just shouldn't be happening. And, so I think my responsibility as a healthcare provider is, yes, to provide this information to my patients and say, look, there are other ways to do this. And even talking to front office people and trying to have very candid conversations about this, they're going to say, well, we give, our players an option. We say, you can either try it this way and you might only get to AA or AAA, and you're talking to an 18 or 19-year-old, or we can show you these two pitches and we think you'll get to the big leagues quickly. Well, you may get there quickly, but you may only last a year. And how do you pose that question to an 18, 19-year-old that has been sitting his entire life dreaming about going to the major leagues and give him that information? I think that, I've got two pitchers on my pitching staff that are clearly show you that you can get to the big leagues and not throw 98 to 100 and not have to spin the crap out of the baseball. Dane Dunning and Cody Bradford. They're guys that have developed, a little more slowly as pitchers, but have found a place in the big leagues. I say, what about Kyle Hendricks to guys? Oh, he's a one-off. Well, maybe he's not a one-off. Maybe it's just we're not taking the time and putting the effort in to teach guys the art of pitching. I mean, what's the value of a whip of 0.8 if it lasts 2 months versus a guy maybe has a whip of 1.1 but plays 162? The teams that get to the postseason with a healthy pitching staff are going to win. Ask
By
the
the way,
Dodgers.
I love what you did there, bringing up Dane Dunning. Us Gators,
Yeah,
we
man.
stick together, right? We stick together.
Us,
So
us
I
Gators.
see exactly what you did there. Now we'll let Scott ask his question.
Well, I'm curious on two fronts. One, what you think about the pitch clock and if that's leading to a problem. Some think it is the problem. I think most agree that it's just part of the problem. And then two, what is the actual fix? Because you mentioned how it needs to start at the top, but we keep talking about everything. I think it keeps getting worse. I mean, it's valuing velo and spin, and then you bring guys over and you teach them even more velo and spin. So do we have to create some special rules? Like, we have pitch clock to improve pace of play, but on the other side, do we have to create some rules in the game that actually stop this? I don't know what they are, like limiting velo. Like, you can't, I don't know what to do here. Do you?
Look, I think, as a physician, I always say your patient at some point has to take some ownership and some responsibility for their health and their well-being. If you come into my office and you smoke, and I say, look, you want to continue to smoke, you have an X percentage chance of getting cancer and maybe dying. Well, I think that obviously this is a much less meaningful issue from a healthcare standpoint. I certainly don't want to compare a tragedy like that, but I think that, but the message is that patients, individuals, players need to have some type of responsibility and accountability for their own health and well-being, and say that, look, here's the information. You need to be careful with maybe some of the things that you're being told and taught, and that there is another side to this, and that there maybe is another way to achieve your goals, and maybe perhaps provide you with more longevity over the course of your career, and better health. So I think, again, some of this you have to throw back on the individual, on the players themselves. And I get that's a very, very difficult thing for them to do, especially the younger players. But I think that baseball, just like concussions in the NFL, I think that you have to somehow, some way, face the fact that there is a problem here. Let's figure out what it is. Let's figure out the factors involved. With respect to the pitch clock, I ask all the players that come in the same question as well. Has the pitch clock had an effect on you? And it's interesting that the younger players will tell you no, that they have not found this to be an issue at all. And whether that's because this is now the way they're brought up and trained, or it's because they're younger and their bounce back ability in the midst of a game, pitch to pitch, is better, their resiliency, that's hard to say. But the older pitchers will tell you that, there are times they just want to step off the mound, 9-10 pitch at bat, guys just grinding out foul balls, and, sometimes they just need to take a blow, and the hitter's allowed to take a break in an at bat, but why isn't the pitcher? So I think there has to be some kind of happy medium here. There has to be some discussion to at least take a deeper look and perhaps walk back some of the things that we've been doing, whether it's tack. I do think that's a big thing. I think it'd be safer for hitters too if pitchers have a little bit of tack on them. Your better hitters will tell you that. They at least know that the pitcher knows where the ball's going. So I think there can be some kind of compromises here that would benefit the game and benefit, from my standpoint, most importantly, health.
Yeah. Kratz disagrees with you. He thinks, because he wasn't a good hitter, so he disagrees with all of what you just said. All right, so I have to ask you a question, and I'm sorry, this is going to be this is more of a personal question. A guy I used to work out with, Chuck Wolf, I know he contacted you, and I'm sorry I gave out your number without asking. But his big thing is he talks about hips and hip rotation, and especially a right-handed pitcher, their front hip, their left hip, right? And he's done a study on this for 10 plus years. And he says, like, left hips are tight, therefore they can't get it out front, and they recoil, and that puts more stress. So we've talked about hips, we've talked about spin, we've talked about pitch shape, we've talked about tackiness, we've talked about pitch clocks. So there is no solution. To me, it comes across as like there's too many things, and we need to start with one and work our way from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. But I just want to see this go away. Because every day it's like, yesterday was Fromberg, today is Nick Pivetta, right? The day before was Strider, and you're like Shane Bieber. You're just like, gosh, and they're all coming to see you. That's why you can drive a Ferrari.
I think that I think it's never going to go away completely, but I do think there are ways we can mitigate this, and some of this is from the coaching side. It's an awareness that and incentivizing coaches in some way that, hey, take a little longer to develop this guy, but develop him so that he lasts and that we have him for an enduring period of time, so that we can maximize his value to the team, so to speak, and maximize his value to the game. I mean, how good is it for baseball and the fans when these ace pitchers are constantly going down and churning over? If there's somebody showed me a chart. If you look at like the top 25 hardest throwers in the game from like 2017, and last year you looked at that same chart, how many individuals you think were still on that same chart? Top 25, hardest throwers in the game. There were two. And when you look at that kind of turnover in rosters and players, I don't think it's good for baseball. As a fan of baseball growing up and loving the game and loving certain players.
Well, Doc, we appreciate the time. We are totally on the same page and learning a ton from you. And I think every pitcher, major leaguer or 10-year-old, needs to listen to this conversation and think about arm care. So thank you for joining us. It's super important.
Appreciate it, guys.
And we appreciate you being outspoken about it too, because the game needs to hear it. So thank you. I know you're a busy man, and hopefully we'll catch you down the line.
For sure, guys. Good luck.
Hey, and next time I'm in Dallas, you owe me dinner, lunch, breakfast, something. I don't know. Thanks, Doc. Great seeing you.
Thank you, Doc.
All right, guys. Take care.
You too.
He said
See
you're
ya.
on. He said you're on.
Hey, we'll be in Texas for All-Star.
For the All-Star, right? He was one of the best. When I was there in 2013, he was the team doctor, and we became tight because he worked at University of Florida. He was like the head orthopod guy.
Oh, I didn't know. Some fans were asking.
Yeah,
like,
no, he didn't go to school there, but
connection?
he was like the head
Gotcha.
doctor. I don't know what you call it, but he was like the head of the orthopod. So we had an instant connection, and we would talk. Hey, everybody, be sure to like and subscribe for more content.
We're back here every weekday, all year long, so do not miss an episode.
The videos are coming in all day. Here's another video you might enjoy.
Baseball the way it should be covered.